I never thought I would be the kind of person to commit property damage over a homeowner association dispute, but here I am, wire cutters in hand, staring at the severed power cable dangling from the gate motor like a dead snake. My name is Derek O'Connor, and I have lived in Meadowbrook Estates in Scottsdale, Arizona for 3 years. When my wife Sarah and I bought our house here, we thought we were moving into paradise. The neighborhood had pristine lawns, a community pool, tennis courts, and those fancy entry gates that made you feel like you lived somewhere special. What we did not know was that the HOA was run by a woman who treated the community rules like they were handed down from God himself on stone tablets. Her name was Patricia, and she was the stereotypical middle-aged HOA president you see in memes. Blonde highlights that were a shade too bright, designer sunglasses perched on her head at all times, and a perpetual expression like she had just smelled something unpleasant. She drove a white Mercedes SUV with a bumper sticker that said "Live, Laugh, Love," which I always found ironic considering she seemed incapable of doing any of those things when it came to her neighbors. The trouble started on a Tuesday in August. Arizona summers are brutal, and this one was particularly nasty. Temperatures were hitting 115 degrees regularly, and the power grid was struggling. Our utility company, Southwest Energy, had been sending out warnings about potential rolling blackouts for weeks. Being a software engineer who works from home, I could not afford to lose power during the workday. I had client meetings, deadlines, and servers to maintain. So I did what any reasonable person would do and bought a generator. It was not some massive industrial thing. I purchased a mid-sized Generac generator from Home Depot, had it professionally installed on a concrete pad beside my house, and made sure it was at least 20 feet from my neighbor's property line. The installation guy, a weathered man named Tom who had been doing this for 30 years, assured me it met all county codes and regulations. I even checked the HOA bylaws myself, reading through all 73 pages of mind-numbing legalese, and there was absolutely nothing prohibiting backup generators. The first time I ran, it was on a Wednesday morning when Southwest Energy announced a planned maintenance outage in our area from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. I needed it for work, plain and simple. The generator hummed to life, a steady mechanical purr that was actually quieter than my neighbor's pool pump. I settled into my home office, got through my meetings, wrote some code, and everything was fine, until I checked my mailbox that evening. The envelope was there, tucked between a Bed Bath & Beyond coupon mailer and my water bill. Official HOA letterhead, my name and address printed in that impersonal computer font. I opened it right there at the mailbox, and my blood pressure immediately spiked. Notice of violation, it read in bold letters at the top. Below that, a formal complaint had been filed against me for operating excessive noise-generating equipment and creating a disturbance to the peaceful enjoyment of the community. The fine was $250, due within 14 days, and if the violation was not corrected, additional fines of $100 per day would be assessed. I stood there in the 100-degree heat, sweat dripping down my back, reading this absurd letter. The generator had run for 6 hours. 6 hours, and it was quieter than half the landscaping equipment that ran through our neighborhood every single day. This had to be a mistake. I called the HOA office the next morning. A bored-sounding woman named Jennifer answered and transferred me to Patricia without much ceremony. Meadowbrook HOA, Patricia speaking. Her voice had that syrupy sweet quality that immediately put me on edge. "Hi, Patricia. This is Derek O'Connor from 4782 Sagaro Drive." I received a violation notice yesterday about my generator, and I think there has been some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Mr. O'Connor. You were operating industrial equipment that created a noise disturbance. Multiple neighbors complained. Multiple neighbors. Who complained? The generator is quieter than a lawn mower, and I checked the bylaws. There is nothing that prohibits backup generators. I heard papers shuffling on her end. Section 12, paragraph 4 states that no homeowner shall engage in activities that create excessive noise or disturbance. Your generator violates that provision. That is incredibly vague. By that logic, nobody could mow their lawn or run a pool pump. I need the generator for work when the power goes out. We have been having blackouts all summer. Perhaps you should consider finding alternative work arrangements on those days, Mr. O'Connor. The fine stands. You have 14 days to pay, and if you run that generator again, additional fines will be assessed. Have a nice day. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding my phone, genuinely stunned. This was insane. I had done nothing wrong, followed every rule, and now I was being fined $250 for running a quiet, code-compliant generator during a planned power outage. I spent the rest of that day fuming and researching. I pulled up the Arizona revised statutes on HOA governance, read through case law, and joined 3 different Facebook groups for people dealing with HOA disputes. The consensus was clear. I was right, and Patricia was on a power trip. The bylaws did not prohibit generators, and the noise ordinance she cited was meant for things like late-night parties or barking dogs, not essential equipment operated during daylight hours. I decided to fight it. I drafted a formal letter disputing the fine, cited the specific sections of Arizona law that supported my position, and included documentation of the generator's noise rating, which was well within acceptable limits. I even got a statement from Tom, the installer, confirming it met all codes. I sent this via certified mail to the HOA office and felt pretty good about myself. 2 weeks later, I got their response. It was brief. Your appeal has been reviewed and denied. The fine of $250 is now overdue. An additional late fee of $50 has been added to your account. Total amount due, $300. I called an attorney. His name was Marcus Webb, and he specialized in HOA disputes. He listened to my story, reviewed my documentation, and gave me his assessment. You are completely in the right here, Derek. The problem is, fighting this will cost you more in legal fees than just paying the fine. HOA litigation is expensive and time-consuming. These cases can drag on for years. My retainer alone is $2,500, so I should just pay it. Let them get away with this. I am not saying that. I am saying you need to decide if this is the hill you want to die on. Sometimes the smart play is to pay the unjust fine and move on with your life. I thanked him for his time and hung up feeling defeated. Sarah tried to comfort me that evening. Just pay it, Derek. It is not worth the stress. $300 is not going to break us. It is not about the money, I said, which was true. It is about the principle. Patricia is abusing her authority. If I pay this, she will just keep doing it to other people. Maybe, but you cannot fight every injustice in the world. Pick your battles. She was right, of course. She usually was. But something in me could not let this go. I paid the fine, but I did not forget. August turned into September, and the heat did not let up. Southwest Energy sent out another notice about planned maintenance outages. This time, it was my entire subdivision, scheduled for a full 8 hours on a Thursday. I had 3 major client calls that day and a project deadline that could not be moved. I absolutely needed my generator. The night before, I made a decision. I was going to run my generator, do my work, and document everything. If Patricia wanted to find me again, I would have proof of exactly how unreasonable she was being. Maybe I could not afford to sue, but I could certainly post about it on social media and the neighborhood forums. Public shaming might be the only weapon I had. Thursday morning arrived. The power went out at 8 a.m. as scheduled. I went outside, fired up the generator, and went to work. Around 10 a.m., I saw Patricia's white Mercedes SUV drive slowly past my house. She stopped, and I watched from my window as she got out, took several photos of my generator with her phone, and then made notes on a clipboard. She did not knock on my door or attempt to speak to me, just documented her evidence and drove away. The violation notice arrived the next day. This time, the fine was $500. $500 for running a generator during a planned power outage in the middle of a workday. The letter stated this was my second offense, and that any future violations would result in escalating fines and possible legal action to place a lien on my property. A lien on my house. For running a generator, I called Marcus Webb again. He confirmed that yes, technically the HOA could place a lien on my property for unpaid fines, and if the lien went unpaid long enough, they could even foreclose. It was extreme and rarely happened, but it was legally possible. This is extortion, I said. It is an HOA exercising its authority. Welcome to modern homeownership in America. I paid the $500. I had no choice. But now I was out $800 total, and my resentment was growing into something darker. I started paying attention to everything the HOA did. I noticed that Patricia's house, a sprawling 5,000-square-foot mansion at the end of the nicest cul-de-sac, had landscapers who ran loud equipment for hours every week. Nobody fined her. I noticed that her neighbor had an entire outdoor kitchen setup with a gas-powered grill that was bigger than my generator. No violations there either. The rules, it seemed, applied to everyone except Patricia and her friends. I brought this up at the next HOA meeting, which was held the third Tuesday of every month in the community clubhouse. About 20 people showed up, which was typical. Patricia sat at the head table with the other board members. Her friend Linda, a thin woman with pursed lips and a permanent frown, and Steve, a retired accountant who seemed to just go along with whatever Patricia wanted. During the open forum portion, I raised my hand. Yes, Derek. Patricia said, my name dripping with disdain. I wanted to discuss the noise ordinance provisions in our bylaws. I have been fined twice now for running a quiet, code-compliant generator during planned power outages. Meanwhile, there are much louder activities happening throughout the neighborhood daily that do not receive violations. Can you explain the standard that is being applied? Patricia smiled, that tight smile people make when they are pretending to be patient. The board reviews complaints as they are submitted. If you have specific concerns about other properties, you are welcome to file a formal complaint. So this is complaint-driven. Someone complained about my generator. We do not disclose the names of complainants, Mr. O'Connor. That is for their protection. Protection from what? I am not asking to confront anyone. I just want to know who has a problem with my generator so maybe we can have a conversation about it. The decision has been made. If you continue to operate equipment that disturbs your neighbors, you will continue to be fined. Is there anything else? I looked around the room. A few people were nodding in agreement with Patricia. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Nobody was going to back me up. Just one more thing, I said. I have checked with the county, and my generator is fully compliant with all noise ordinances. I have documentation from the manufacturer showing it operates at 65 decibels, which is quieter than normal conversation. This feels like selective enforcement, and I wanted that on the record. Noted. Next item of business. And that was it. I was dismissed, my concerns ignored, my money taken. I left that meeting angrier than I had arrived. October brought cooler weather but no relief from the power situation. Arizona's grid was still struggling, and Southwest Energy announced that rolling blackouts would continue through the fall. I had a problem. I needed to work. I needed power to work, and I could not afford to keep paying Patricia's extortion fines. I tried alternatives. I looked into getting a quieter generator, but the one I had was already among the quietest available. I researched battery backup systems, but those were expensive and would not run my entire home office setup for a full day. I even considered renting office space somewhere, but that would cost way more than the fines in the long run. Then Southwest Energy announced another planned outage, this one on a Tuesday in mid-October. 8 hours again, right during my work day. I had a major presentation to a new client that could not be rescheduled. I was trapped. The night before the outage, I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through possibilities. Pay another fine and eat the cost. Try to work from a coffee shop and hope their internet held up. Cancel the meeting and potentially lose the client. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went to my computer. I pulled up the neighborhood map and started looking at the community infrastructure. Meadowbrook Estates had those fancy automatic gates at both entrances, the kind that required a code or a clicker to open. They were Patricia's pride and joy, mentioned in every HOA newsletter as an example of our premium community amenities. Those gates required power to operate. Specifically, they each had a motor housed in a metal box beside the gate mechanism. Those motors were connected to the grid via a power cable that ran underground from the control box. An idea formed in my mind. It was petty. It was probably illegal. It was definitely satisfying to imagine. If Patricia was going to fine me for having a generator that kept my house powered, maybe she should experience what it was like to have no power at all. Maybe those fancy gates should stop working for a while. See how the community felt about that. I pushed the thought away, told myself I was being ridiculous, and went back to bed. But it lingered. Tuesday arrived. The power went out at 8 a.m. I stared at my generator, then at my phone showing my calendar full of important meetings. I made my decision. I fired up the generator, knowing full well what would happen. Patricia showed up at 10:30. I watched from my window as she went through her routine, photos, notes, smug satisfaction. She did not even try to hide it anymore. This was personal for her. She enjoyed wielding power over people who could not fight back. The violation notice arrived on Wednesday. $750 this time. Third offense. The letter mentioned legal action and liens again, with more specificity about the timeline. If I did not pay within 7 days and stop the violations, the HOA would proceed with placing a lien on my property. I sat at my kitchen table holding that letter, and something inside me snapped. I had tried to be reasonable. I had followed the rules. I had paid the unjust fines. I had gone to their meetings and made my case. Nothing had worked. Patricia was going to keep doing this until she drove me out of my own home. That evening, I went to Home Depot. I bought a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters, the kind used for cutting thick electrical cables. I paid cash. I did not know if I was really going to use them, but having them felt like having options. I spent the next few days in a mental fog, going through the motions of work and life while this plan churned in the back of my mind. Sarah noticed something was off. "You have been weird all week." "What is going on?" "Just stressed about work," I lied. I could not tell her what I was thinking. She would talk me out of it, and part of me did not want to be talked out of it. The following Tuesday, I made my move. It was 11 p.m., well after dark. I dressed in black clothes, grabbed the wire cutters, and walked down to the community's main entrance gate. The gate area was well lit, but there were no cameras. I had checked during my daytime walks over the past week. The HOA had cameras at the pool and clubhouse, but not at the gates. Probably because nobody thought anyone would mess with them. My heart was pounding as I approached the metal control box housing the gate motor. The power cable ran into the bottom of the box through a conduit. It was thick, industrial-grade wiring, but my cutters were designed for exactly this. I knelt down, positioned the cutters, and hesitated. This was vandalism, destruction of property. If I got caught, I could be arrested. The HOA could sue me for damages. I could lose my house anyway, not from a lien but from legal fees and judgments. But then I thought about Patricia's smug face. Her arbitrary fines, her abuse of power, the way she had ignored every attempt I made to resolve this reasonably. The $850 I had already paid for the crime of trying to work during power outages. I squeezed the cutters. The cable resisted for a moment, then gave way with a satisfying crunch. Sparks flew briefly, making me jump back, then everything went dark. The gate motor's little status light went out. The gate itself just sat there, now unable to open or close electrically. I stood up, heart racing, and walked quickly back to my house. I half expected alarms to go off or police to appear, but nothing happened. The neighborhood was silent except for the usual desert night sounds. I went inside, stashed the wire cutters in my garage, and tried to calm down. What had I done? I had just committed a crime out of spite. This was not who I was. I was a software engineer, a homeowner, a generally law-abiding citizen. I did not vandalize community property because I was mad at the HOA president, except I just had. I barely slept that night. Every car that drove by, I thought was the police coming for me. Every sound made me jump. Sarah asked if I was feeling okay, and I blamed it on too much coffee. Wednesday morning, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded. People were posting about the broken gate, complaining that they had to get out of their cars to manually open it to leave for work. Some were worried about security. Others were demanding the HOA fix it immediately. Patricia posted around 9 a.m. We are aware of the issue with the main gate. It appears there was a power surge that damaged the motor. An electrician has been called and repairs should be completed by this afternoon. We apologize for the inconvenience. A power surge. She had no idea it had been cut. Relief washed over me. If they thought it was a power surge, they would not be looking for vandalism. They would just fix it and move on. The electrician showed up around noon. I watched from my window as he examined the gate motor, traced the power cable, and found the cut. He called someone, and within 30 minutes, Patricia's Mercedes was pulling up to the gate. I could not hear what they were saying, but I could see Patricia's body language change from confused to angry in about 5 seconds. She was gesturing at the cut cable, looking around the area like she might spot the culprit right then and there. The electrician was shaking his head, explaining something. This was clearly not a power surge. My phone buzzed. A new post in the neighborhood group from Patricia. Update on the gate situation. The power cable to the gate motor was deliberately cut. This was an act of vandalism. We have filed a police report and will be installing security cameras at all entry points. If anyone has information about this crime, please contact the HOA office immediately. My stomach dropped. Police report. Cameras. This had just gotten very real. The next few days were tense. Police did come by, talked to some neighbors, examined the cut cable. A young officer named Rodriguez even knocked on my door on Friday afternoon. "Good afternoon, sir. I am Officer Rodriguez with Scottsdale PD. We are investigating the vandalism at your community gate. Did you happen to see or hear anything unusual Tuesday night?" I forced myself to stay calm. "Tuesday night? No, I did not notice anything. What happened?" "Someone cut the power cable to the gate motor. Caused about $1,500 in damage between the cable, the repair labor, and the temporary security the HOA had to hire. We are talking to residents to see if anyone saw anything suspicious." "Sorry, I did not see anything. I was probably asleep by the time it happened." "Probably, you are not sure. I mean, I was asleep. I go to bed around 10 most nights." He made a note. "Okay. Well, if you remember anything or if you hear neighbors talking about it, give us a call." He handed me a card with a case number. "Will do, officer." He left, and I closed the door, my hands shaking. I had just lied to a police officer. This was getting worse. I should have just paid the stupid fines and moved on with my life like Sarah said. But then Saturday brought another development. Southwest Energy announced more rolling blackouts for the following week. Another planned outage in our area, Tuesday morning through afternoon. I would need my generator again, which meant another fine from Patricia, which meant more money thrown away. The irony was not lost on me. I had vandalized community property to get revenge on Patricia, but it had not changed anything. She would still fine me. I would still have to pay or face a lien. All I had accomplished was committing a crime and dodging a police investigation. Sunday afternoon, I got a text from a neighbor named Gary who lived 3 houses down. "Hey Derek, bunch of us are pretty frustrated with the HOA. Heard about your generator fines. Want to grab a beer and talk." I met Gary and 3 other neighbors at a local sports bar that evening. They were all fed up with Patricia for various reasons. Gary had been fined for parking his work truck in his own driveway overnight. Linda and Frank, a couple from the next street over, got a violation for their fence being 6 inches taller than allowed, even though it had been that height when they bought the house 5 years ago. And Mark, a single guy about my age, had been fined for having a basketball hoop that was visible from the street. "She is on a crusade," Gary said. "Ever since she became president 2 years ago, the violations have tripled. I think she just likes the power." "Someone should run against her in the next election," Linda suggested. "When is that?" I asked. "February. But nobody ever runs. She wins by default every time because everyone is too busy or too scared to challenge her." An idea started forming. What if someone did run? "What if we organized and actually voted her out?" Mark laughed. "Good luck. She has her friends on the board, she controls the meeting agendas, and most people in the neighborhood do not even show up to vote. She would destroy any opposition." "Maybe, but it is better than doing nothing." We talked for another hour, venting frustrations and sharing horror stories. By the end, we had agreed to at least try to organize some opposition for the February election. It felt good to know I was not alone in this, but the immediate problem remained: Tuesday's power outage and my generator. If I ran it, Patricia would fine me again. If I did not run it, I could not work and might lose clients. I was trapped in an impossible situation. Monday night, I made a decision. I was going to run my generator and I was going to document everything. I set up my phone to record video of the generator running with a timestamp. I recorded the ambient noise level using a decibel meter app. I took photos showing the distance from neighboring properties. If Patricia fined me again, I would have irrefutable evidence that the generator was reasonable and not causing any real disturbance. Maybe it would not matter in the HOA's kangaroo court, but it might matter in real court if it ever got that far, or at least in the court of public opinion online. Tuesday morning, the power went out as scheduled. I started my generator and began work. Around 11 a.m., Patricia's Mercedes appeared. She stopped, did her photo routine, and left. No surprises there, but then something unexpected happened. Around 1 p.m., Gary texted me. "Hey man." I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. She was bragging to someone about how she is collecting fines from you and a few others. Said the money goes into the HOA's general fund, which gives them more budget for improvements she wants. Thought you should know. I stared at that text for a long time. The fines were not about noise or rules. They were about revenue. Patricia was using her position to extract money from homeowners to fund projects she personally wanted. This was corruption, plain and simple. I texted back, "Can you send me a recording if you ever hear her say something like that again? That might be important." "Will do." The violation notice arrived Wednesday. $1,000 this time, fourth offense. The letter stated that this was my final warning before legal action would be taken to place a lien on my property and assess additional penalties. $1,000. I had now been fined $2,550 total for running a legal, quiet generator during power outages so I could work. I did not pay it. Not this time. Instead, I sent a certified letter to the HOA board formally disputing the fine and requesting a hearing before the full board. Arizona law required HOAs to provide this opportunity before taking serious actions like placing liens. It was time to force this into the open. The hearing was scheduled for the next regular board meeting, which was 3 weeks away. In the meantime, I consulted with Marcus Webb again. He reviewed everything I had documented and gave me his assessment. "You have a solid case that the fines are arbitrary and capricious. The problem is still the cost of litigation. Even if you win, you will spend more in legal fees than the fines total." What if this is not just about me? Gary said Patricia is fine farming multiple people. What if we get everyone together and file some kind of class action? Marcus considered this. Class actions against HOAs are rare and complicated, but it is possible if you can show a pattern of abuse. You would need multiple homeowners willing to participate, detailed documentation of violations and fines, and evidence that the HOA is acting outside its authority. I can get that. Give me 3 weeks. I spent the next few weeks becoming an investigative journalist. I went door to door talking to neighbors, posting in the Facebook group, attending the neighborhood coffee meetups. I found 12 families who had been hit with what they considered unfair fines in the past year. I collected copies of their violation notices, their appeal attempts, and Patricia's denials. The pattern was clear. Anyone who was not part of Patricia's inner circle was fair game. The violations were often for minor issues or things not actually prohibited in the bylaws. Appeals were routinely denied without explanation. And the money collected was going into a general fund that Patricia controlled with minimal oversight. I compiled everything into a detailed document with photos, violation notices, and a timeline. I created a spreadsheet showing that violation fines had increased by 400% since Patricia took over as president. I even found the HOA's tax returns, which were public record, showing that fine revenue had become a significant part of their budget. This was not about maintaining community standards. This was about money and power. The night before the board meeting, I could not sleep again. This time it was not fear but anticipation. I was going to walk into that meeting with evidence, with allies, and with a plan. Patricia had been abusing her authority for 2 years, and tomorrow it was going to catch up with her. The meeting was packed. Word had spread about my hearing, and at least 30 people showed up, triple the normal attendance. Patricia looked surprised and slightly nervous when she walked in and saw the crowd. The meeting started with the usual administrative business: approval of last month's minutes, financial report, maintenance updates. Then came the hearing section. Patricia cleared her throat and shuffled some papers. We have a hearing request from Derek O'Connor regarding fines assessed for generator noise violations. Mr. O'Connor, you have 10 minutes to present your case. I stood up and walked to the front of the room. I had prepared a presentation on my laptop connected to the projector. Sarah had told me this morning that I was being crazy, that I should just pay the fines and move on, but she did not understand. This was about more than money now. Thank you. I am here to dispute 4 separate fines totaling $2,550 assessed against me for operating a backup generator during planned power outages. I believe these fines are unjust, unsupported by our bylaws, and part of a larger pattern of abuse by this board. Patricia started to interrupt, but I kept going. Let me present my evidence. First, our bylaws do not prohibit backup generators. Section 12, paragraph 4, which was cited in my violations, refers to excessive noise. My generator operates at 65 decibels, which is quieter than a normal conversation and well within county noise limits. Here are the manufacturer specifications and an independent noise test I had conducted. I showed the documents on the screen. People were leaning forward, paying attention. Second, I operated this generator only during planned power outages when I needed power to work from home. These outages were announced in advance by Southwest Energy and lasted 6 to 8 hours during business hours. I had no alternative. Third, and this is the important part, I am not the only one being targeted with questionable fines. In the past 3 weeks, I have spoken with 12 other families in this community who have similar stories. Fines for violations that are not in the bylaws or for minor issues with no realistic opportunity to appeal. I pulled up my spreadsheet showing the violation data. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. Since Patricia became president, violation fines have increased by 400%. The HOA is now collecting over $40,000 per year in fines, compared to $10,000 3 years ago. This money goes into a general fund with minimal oversight. Patricia, can you explain what justifies this 4-fold increase in fines? Patricia's face was red. Mr. O'Connor, you are out of order. This hearing is about your specific violations, not about board policy. My violations are the result of board policy. A policy that seems designed to extract money from homeowners rather than maintain community standards. Steve, the accountant, spoke up. Derek, I think you are mischaracterizing the situation. We have had more violations because we have been more diligent about enforcement. Diligent or selective? Because I have noticed that certain homes, including Patricia's, never seem to receive violations despite having similar or louder equipment than what I have been fined for. Patricia's landscaping crew runs commercial equipment for hours every week. That is okay, but my generator during a power outage is not. The room erupted in conversations. People were talking over each other, some agreeing with me, others defending Patricia. This was getting out of hand. Patricia banged her gavel. Order, Mr. O'Connor, you have made your points. The board will take your dispute under advisement and render a decision within 30 days. That is not good enough. I am requesting that all fines against me be immediately reversed and that this board commission an independent review of all violations issued in the past 2 years. Your request is noted. This hearing is concluded. I walked back to my seat, my heart pounding. I had said what I needed to say. The evidence was out there. Now it was up to everyone else. After the meeting, several people came up to thank me. Gary clapped me on the shoulder. "That was brutal, man. You basically accused Patricia of corruption in front of everyone. Because she is corrupt, the numbers do not lie, true. But she is going to come after you hard now, be ready for that." He was right. Over the next few days, I started receiving petty violations for everything imaginable. My trash cans were visible from the street for 15 minutes after trash pickup. $100 fine. A small weed in my front yard landscaping. $75 fine. My house number was slightly faded and needed repainting. $50 fine. It was harassment, and it was obvious. But every violation notice I received, I shared in the neighborhood Facebook group with commentary about the selective enforcement. Public opinion was shifting. People were starting to see what I had been dealing with. Then came the police visit I had been dreading. Officer Rodriguez showed up at my door again on a Friday afternoon. "Mr. O'Connor, I need to ask you some follow-up questions about the gate vandalism from last month." My mouth went dry. "Okay. We have been reviewing the timeline of events. The vandalism occurred shortly after you received your second fine from the HOA. You have been in an ongoing dispute with the HOA president, and you live close enough to the gate to have easy access. I want to ask you directly, did you cut that cable? This was it." The moment I had to decide whether to lie to a police officer's face or confess to a crime, I thought about all the consequences. Arrest, criminal charges, potential jail time, a permanent record. But I also thought about everything that had happened, about Patricia's abuse of power, about the system that protected people like her while punishing people like me. "Yes," I said, "I cut the cable." Officer Rodriguez's expression did not change. "Can you tell me why?" "Because I was angry. Because the HOA president was fining me for nothing, taking my money, abusing her authority, and I wanted to get back at her somehow. It was stupid and petty and wrong, and I regret it." He made notes in his little notebook. "Do you still have the wire cutters you used?" "Yes." "They are in my garage. I need to take those as evidence. I also need you to come down to the station to make a formal statement." "Am I under arrest?" "Not at this moment, but you have admitted to criminal damage to property. The HOA will likely press charges. You are looking at a Class 1 misdemeanor at minimum, possibly worse depending on how the prosecutor wants to handle it." Sarah came into the room. "Derek, what is going on?" "I need to go to the police station. I will explain everything later." The look on her face broke my heart. Confusion, worry, betrayal. I had kept this from her, and now it was all falling apart. I rode with Officer Rodriguez to the station. I gave a formal statement, admitting everything. They took my wire cutters as evidence. They took my mugshot and fingerprints. And then they let me go with a notice to appear in court in 6 weeks. I drove home in a daze. What had I done? I had been fighting against an unjust HOA, and now I was a criminal facing charges. All because I could not control my anger and my need for revenge. Sarah was waiting when I got home. "Explain, now." I told her everything. The fines, the frustration, the vandalism, the investigation, the confession. She listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Then, you lied to me. For weeks you have been lying about what was going on." "I know, I am sorry, I did not want you to worry." "Worry? Derek, you committed a crime, you could go to jail. We could lose everything because you were mad at the HOA lady. Do you understand how insane that is?" It was not just about being mad. She was abusing her power, stealing money from people. So you report her to the state, you get a lawyer, you organize politically. You do not vandalize property like some teenager. What were you thinking? I did not have a good answer. What had I been thinking? That cutting a cable would make me feel better. that Patricia would learn some kind of lesson, that I was striking a blow against injustice. I was not thinking, I admitted. I was just angry. Well, now you get to deal with the consequences. She went upstairs. I heard our bedroom door close. I sat on the couch alone, contemplating the wreckage of the past few months. The news of my arrest spread through the neighborhood quickly. The Facebook group lit up with discussions. Some people were supportive, saying I had been pushed too far. Others condemned me for vandalism and giving the community a black eye. Patricia posted a statement saying she was saddened that disputes had escalated to criminal behavior, and that the HOA remains committed to maintaining community standards through legal and appropriate means. The hypocrisy of that statement made me want to punch a wall. My court date was set for late November. Marcus Webb recommended a criminal defense attorney named Rachel Simmons. She reviewed the case and gave me the reality check I needed. You confessed, so there is not much defense to mount. The best we can do is argue for leniency, maybe get it pleaded down to a lesser charge or get you probation instead of jail time. You are a first-time offender with a clean record, which helps. But the victim here is an HOA that will want to make an example of you. What is the worst-case scenario? Criminal damage in Arizona, for property valued over $1,500, can be a Class 6 felony. You are looking at potential jail time, up to 1.5 years, plus fines and restitution. Best case, we get it knocked down to a misdemeanor, probation, community service, and you pay to fix what you broke. 18 months in jail for cutting a cable. The weight of what I had done settled over me like a lead blanket. The weeks leading up to the court date were awful. Sarah was barely speaking to me. Work was suffering because I could not concentrate, and the HOA was still sending me violation notices and demanding payment of all outstanding fines, now totaling over $3,000 with late fees. But then something unexpected happened. The neighborhood group that Gary and I had started organizing began to gain traction. People were angry about the violations, about Patricia's management, about the way the whole community was being run. A petition started circulating calling for Patricia's resignation. It gained over 200 signatures, more than half the homes in Meadowbrook Estates. Someone also filed a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOAs. They opened an investigation into whether Patricia had been properly following state laws regarding financial transparency and violation procedures. Patricia fought back. She sent cease and desist letters to the petition organizers. She called special board meetings to address what she called false allegations and defamatory statements. She threatened to sue me personally for damaging the HOA's reputation, but the momentum was against her now. Too many people had been wronged. Too much evidence of selective enforcement and financial impropriety had come to light. The state investigation was finding real problems with how the HOA had been managed. Then, 2 weeks before my court date, the dominoes really started falling. A local news station picked up the story. A reporter named Jennifer Klein did a piece on HOA abuse in Arizona, featuring Meadowbrook Estates as a case study. She interviewed me, Gary, and several other homeowners about the violations and fines. She got Patricia on camera, and Patricia's defensive, hostile responses made her look exactly like the petty tyrant she was. The piece aired on a Wednesday evening. By Thursday morning, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. News outlets across the country were picking it up as another example of out-of-control HOAs. Meadowbrook Estates became famous for all the wrong reasons. Patricia's response was to double down. She sent out an email to all homeowners defending her actions and attacking the news story as biased. She accused me of orchestrating a media campaign to avoid consequences for my criminal behavior. But the state investigation concluded the following week, and the findings were damning. The Arizona Department of Real Estate found that the HOA had failed to properly document violations, had not followed its own bylaws in many cases, and had not maintained adequate financial records for how fine money was being spent. They issued a formal reprimand and required the HOA to implement new oversight procedures. Armed with this report, I went into my court hearing with a little more hope. Maybe the judge would see that, while what I did was wrong, it was not happening in a vacuum. I had been pushed to a breaking point by systematic abuse. The hearing was in Scottsdale Municipal Court on a Monday morning. Rachel Simmons represented me. The HOA, represented by their attorney Douglas Parks, was pushing for the maximum penalty. They wanted to make an example of me. The judge was a woman in her 50s named Margaret Chen. She reviewed the case file, listened to both sides present their arguments, and then addressed me directly. "Mr. O'Connor, you have admitted to intentionally damaging property belonging to the Homeowners Association. This is a serious matter. Do you understand that?" "Yes, Your Honor." "The prosecution is recommending a Class 6 felony charge with jail time. Your attorney is asking for probation and restitution. Before I make my decision, I want to hear from you. Why did you do this?" I stood up. Rachel had advised me to keep it brief and remorseful, but I needed to tell the truth. "Your Honor, I was wrong to cut that cable. I knew it was wrong when I did it, and I have regretted it ever since. But I want you to understand the context. The HOA president had been targeting me with escalating fines for operating a quiet, legal backup generator during power outages so I could work from home. I tried to resolve it through proper channels. I appealed through the HOA, I went to meetings. I documented everything to show I was not violating any actual rules. Nothing worked. The fines kept coming, getting higher each time, and I was facing a lien on my house. I felt powerless and angry, so I did something stupid to get back at them. It was vandalism born out of frustration, not malice. I should have found a better way to handle it. Judge Chen made notes. "I have reviewed the state's investigation report into your HOA. It appears your complaints about selective enforcement and improper procedures were substantiated. However, that does not excuse criminal behavior. You had legal remedies available to you. I know, Your Honor, I should have pursued those. I take full responsibility for what I did." She was quiet for a moment, reviewing her notes. Then she rendered her decision. "Mr. O'Connor, I am going to sentence you to 1 year of supervised probation, 100 hours of community service, and you will pay full restitution to the HOA for the damage, which has been calculated at $1,800. This will be charged as a Class 1 misdemeanor, not a felony. If you successfully complete probation with no further incidents, you may petition to have this expunged from your record. Do you understand these terms?" "Yes, Your Honor, thank you." It was not nothing. A year of probation, community service, and $1,800 was significant. But it was also not jail time or a felony record. I could live with this. After the hearing, Rachel congratulated me. That was the best outcome we could have hoped for. Judge Chen clearly took the context into account. "Now just stay out of trouble for a year and you will be fine." I went home and told Sarah the news. She seemed relieved but still distant. The damage to our relationship was going to take time to repair, but the story was not over. The February HOA elections were approaching, and the opposition movement was organizing seriously now. Gary decided to run for president. Linda and Frank were running for the other board positions. They had a platform, transparent finances, fair enforcement of rules, and ending the culture of petty violations. Patricia fought hard to maintain her position. She sent multiple emails defending her record, highlighting improvements she had made to the community, warning that the opposition would lead to chaos and declining property values. But she had lost too much credibility. The news coverage, the state investigation, and the stories from too many wronged homeowners had turned public opinion against her. When the election results were announced at the March meeting, it was not even close. Gary won the presidency with 68% of the vote. Linda and Frank won their positions too. Patricia was completely voted out. I watched her leave that meeting, her face tight with suppressed rage. She did not say goodbye to anyone, just got in her Mercedes and drove away. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me just felt sad that it had come to all this. Gary's first act as president was to review all outstanding violations and fines. He assembled a committee of homeowners to evaluate each one based on whether it was justified by the bylaws and whether the enforcement had been fair. They found that 40% of violations issued in the past 2 years should never have been assessed. My generator fines were among those reversed. I received a formal letter from the new board apologizing for the improper enforcement and refunding all the money I had paid. $2,550 back in my account. The neighborhood Facebook group erupted in celebration. Other people were getting their money back too. The culture was changing. People were talking about community again instead of living in fear of violation notices. But my legal troubles were not completely over. The state had another surprise in store. 2 months after my court hearing, the Arizona Attorney General's office announced they were investigating Patricia personally for potential fraud and embezzlement related to HOA funds. It turned out that my spreadsheet tracking fine revenue had caught someone's attention. When auditors dug deeper into the HOA's finances, they found irregularities. Money that should have been in reserve accounts was missing. Expenses that did not match up with actual work performed. Payments to vendors who could not be verified. Patricia had been skimming. Not huge amounts, but enough. Over 2 years, she had diverted about $30,000 from HOA funds for her personal use, disguised as payments for various services and improvements. The Attorney General filed charges: fraud, theft, and misuse of homeowner association funds. Patricia was arrested in June at her home. The local news covered it, showing her being led out in handcuffs. The woman who had terrorized homeowners with petty violations was now facing felony charges herself. Her trial was scheduled for September. I was called as a witness because my fine documentation had helped establish the pattern of improper collections. I testified about the violations, the fines, and how the money was being used to pad the HOA's budget beyond what was needed for legitimate purposes. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman who had used her position for personal gain, who had abused homeowners to extract money that she then partially stole. The defense tried to argue that the financial irregularities were mistakes, not intentional theft, but the evidence was overwhelming. Patricia was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 3 years in state prison and ordered her to pay full restitution of the stolen funds plus additional fines. She was led out of the courtroom crying, her perfect HOA president facade finally shattered completely. I felt no satisfaction watching it. Yes, she had made my life miserable. Yes, she had abused her authority. Yes, she deserved consequences. But seeing someone go to prison, even someone who had wronged you, is not satisfying. It is just sad. My probation period ended in November, a year after the hearing. I had completed all my community service hours, mostly doing landscaping work at city parks. I had paid my restitution. I had stayed out of trouble. Rachel helped me file the petition to have the conviction expunged, and it was granted. Sarah and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. It took months of honest conversations, some couples therapy, and me really working on my anger management. I had learned a hard lesson about the consequences of letting anger drive your actions. The HOA under Gary's leadership became what it should have been all along, a functional organization that maintained common areas and enforced reasonable rules without harassment. Violations became rare because people were treated like adults instead of subjects to be controlled. I kept my generator. Nobody complained about it anymore. When Southwest Energy had its next planned outage, I ran it without fear. It was just a tool doing its job, not a symbol of resistance against tyranny. Looking back on everything that happened, I still regret cutting that cable. It was wrong. It was criminal. It could have destroyed my life. I got lucky that the judge was lenient, and that Patricia's own crimes eventually came to light. But I do not regret standing up to the abuse. I do not regret documenting everything and organizing with my neighbors. I do not regret pushing for change. Those things were right and necessary. Sometimes the system fails. Sometimes people in positions of authority abuse their power. When that happens, you have to fight back, but you have to fight smart. Use the law, use public pressure, use democratic processes. Do not vandalize property out of spite, no matter how good it might feel in the moment. I learned that Meadowbrook Estates was not paradise. It was just a neighborhood, with all the complications and conflicts that come with people living together. The fancy gates did not make us special. They just gave certain people something to control and abuse. Gary and I still have beers sometimes and laugh about the whole saga. He calls it the Great HOA War of Meadowbrook Estates. We won, but not without casualties. My marriage nearly ended. I got a criminal record even if it was later expunged. Patricia went to prison. $1,800 of community property was damaged. Was it worth it? I honestly do not know. The neighborhood is better now. People are happier. The abuse stopped, but the cost was high for everyone involved. Sarah sometimes asks me what I would do differently if I could go back. I tell her I would have hired Marcus Webb from the start, spent the money on a real legal challenge instead of paying the fines. I would have organized the neighborhood opposition sooner. I would have gone to the media earlier. And I definitely would not have cut that cable. But I cannot go back. I can only move forward, carrying the lessons learned from those months of conflict. I am more careful now about picking fights. I am more thoughtful about consequences. I try to channel my anger into productive action instead of destructive revenge. The generator still sits on its concrete pad beside my house, running whenever I need it. It is quieter now, or maybe I just do not notice the noise anymore. Either way, it does its job without drama or conflict. Just power flowing when I need it, keeping my life running smoothly. That is all I ever wanted. Just to live my life, do my work, and not be harassed by petty tyrants with clipboards and measuring tapes. It should not have been that hard. But in a world with homeowner associations, sometimes the simplest things become battles. The final twist came almost a year later. Patricia was released early from prison on parole after serving 18 months. I heard she moved to California to live with her sister, far from Meadowbrook Estates and the neighborhood she had once ruled with an iron fist. I saw her one last time, actually. I was at a gas station in North Scottsdale, filling up my car when a familiar white Mercedes pulled up to the pump across from me. Patricia got out, looking older and tired. Our eyes met for a brief moment. Neither of us said anything. What was there to say? "I destroyed your gate," you fined me unjustly, you stole money, we both got caught. It was all too much and too complicated for a gas station conversation. She looked away first, finished pumping her gas, and drove off. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Anger at what she had put me through, pity for how far she had fallen, relief that it was all finally over. I finished filling my tank and drove home to Meadowbrook Estates. The gates opened automatically with my clicker. The motor hummed smoothly, the new cable working perfectly. Everything looked normal and peaceful, like nothing had ever happened. But those of us who lived through it knew better. We knew what this community had been and what it had become. We knew the price of fighting back against injustice and the cost of letting anger guide your actions. I pulled into my driveway, where Sarah was watering the plants in our front yard. She smiled and waved. I smiled back, grateful that she had stayed, that we had worked through everything, that life had returned to something resembling normal. The generator sat silent beside the house, ready for whenever I might need it again. But for now the power was on, the sun was shining, and everything was peaceful in Meadowbrook Estates. That night, I sat on my back patio with a beer, listening to the desert sounds. Crickets chirping, the distant hum of traffic, a neighbor's dog barking. Normal sounds of normal life. My phone buzzed. A text from Gary. Board meeting tomorrow night, discussing new playground equipment for the park. You should come. I smiled. This was what an HOA should be. Boring discussions about playground equipment, not battles over generators and gate cables. I texted back that I would be there. The stars came out, brilliant in the Arizona sky. I thought about everything that had happened, all the drama and conflict and consequences. If someone had told me 3 years ago that I would commit vandalism over an HOA dispute, get arrested, help bring down a corrupt president, and end up actually caring about playground equipment discussions, I would have thought they were crazy. But life is strange that way. You think you know who you are and what you are capable of until you are pushed past your limits. Then you find out what you will do when you are cornered and angry and desperate. I found out I would cut a cable. Not my proudest moment, but honest. And in the aftermath, when I could have just paid the fines and moved on, I found out I would fight. I would organize and document and refuse to be a victim. Both things were true. I could be destructive and constructive. I could make terrible choices and learn from them. I could be both the problem and part of the solution. Sarah came outside and sat next to me. What are you thinking about? Just everything that happened, how crazy it all got. Do you think you have learned your lesson? Which lesson? Do not vandalize property. Already learned that. Stand up to bullies. Knew that already too. Sometimes the cost of fighting is higher than just walking away. Yeah, I learned that one. She leaned against my shoulder. I am glad you are not in jail. Me too. We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere in California, Patricia was probably doing the same thing, rebuilding her life after prison. Somewhere in Meadowbrook Estates, other homeowners were dealing with their own small dramas and conflicts. Life went on. The generator hummed to life briefly, as I had set it to run a test cycle once a week to keep it maintained. Sarah tensed for a moment, old anxieties resurfacing, but then relaxed when she remembered there was nothing to fear anymore. No violation notices would arrive. No fines would be assessed. It was just a machine doing its job. When the test cycle finished and the generator went silent again, the desert night seemed even quieter than before. Peaceful. Calm. The way it should be. I took another sip of my beer and let myself relax completely for the first time in what felt like years. The war was over. The community had survived. We had all learned lessons, paid prices, and moved forward. Tomorrow I would go to Gary's boring board meeting and discuss playground equipment. I would do my work, pay my bills, and live my life without drama. I would be a normal homeowner in a normal neighborhood with a normal HOA that functioned the way it was supposed to. And if the power ever went out again, I would run my generator without a second thought. Because that is what it was there for. Nothing more, nothing less. Just a generator, doing its job, keeping the lights on when everything else went dark.